You know what's a meme nowadays? Everybody says the Xbox has no exclusive games. Hell, even back in the OG Xbox era, it felt like people memed about the fact that there were no exclusive, no interesting, no unique games on the platform. But let me tell you, I've found 15 games here. I've got a stack. And I'm gonna prove to you guys that you can go deep down the rabbit hole of OG Xbox exclusives. So let's get into it. And the first one I got for you guys is probably just about one of the best first games we could start with, and that is Blinx the Time Sweeper. Why is this such a great pick? Well, this is essentially one of Microsoft's early mascots for the OG Xbox. They were really pushing this game. They had a lot of faith in this game. There was a lot of marketing surrounding this game. I remember seeing it in rental stores all the time. It was being pushed pretty darn hard, and honestly, I can see why. This is actually a really unique 3D platformer. In fact, they actually say on the back of the box that it is the first 4D action game ever made. And the reason they say that is because in addition to all the normal 3D platforming tropes and gameplay mechanics that you'd expect, there is also a time manipulation mechanic in this. You can do things such as pause, you can fast forward, you can rewind, you can step back. Really unique gameplay system, and it involves quite a few puzzles that force the use of those mechanics in really unique and inventive ways. Even though this did get a Platinum Hits release, I think this series kind of was dead on arrival. Frankly, just because the game is it's honestly too hard, right? Like, if they were going for a kid's mascot platformer, it cannot be as brutally difficult as this game is. Everybody I've talked to that has even bothered to try and get pretty far in this has said the same thing. Like, it is very challenging. I did manage to finish this on stream, but it was not without significant struggle. That is not to say I don't recommend this game. It is worth trying out, but just beware, it is very difficult. And there was a sequel, Blinx 2, Masters of Time and Space, which unfortunately I don't think really was able to revive the franchise. I think the damage had sort of been done with this game. The fact that most people couldn't finish it really made Blinx 2, even though there were tons of enhancements and improvements, just the writing was on the wall for this franchise. But Microsoft gave it a legitimate effort, and this is backwards compatible on the newer Xboxes if you want to check it out. Now, this second one here might surprise some people, and I am here to tell you it is an absolute banger of a classic that just is getting slept on. And you might sleep on it if you're not a big fan of the show, but that is Buffy the Vampire Slayer for the OG Xbox. And as you can tell by the little banner there, this is an Xbox exclusive. Now, there was a sequel called Chaos Bleeds. I haven't played that one yet, but after having played this one, I definitely want to check it out. That game is multi-platform though. That one is not exclusive to the OG Xbox, although it does reside. It has a version on there. But this is a fantastic early 6th gen 3D beat 'em up. Probably one of the best that I've personally played of the era. Absolutely phenomenal gameplay loop in this, super satisfying, really good graphics for the time, fantastic character animations, really well written, good pacing, just all around presentation, music. I was absolutely blown away by this. I did not expect this to be as good as it was. I gotta say, for the 20 bucks I think I paid for this, absolutely worth every penny. Games like this reinvigorate my love for video games. When I hit a hidden gem like this, absolutely gets me excited, so can't recommend Buffy enough. This next one is another game based on a license, and I had pretty much zero familiarity with the license before I ended up playing the game, and that is Chronicles of Riddick: Escape from Butcher Bay, starring, of course, Vin Diesel. I should mention this did get a PC release, but if we're talking console releases, Xbox was the only platform of the generation to get it, and that is simply because this is a extremely ambitious FPS. Huge sense of scope and scale in this game, impressive visuals. Like I said, it's an FPS, but it's also part stealth game, it's part espionage, very interesting, tries a lot of different things and does many of them very well. There is no heads-up display in this game, which makes it very immersive. The hand-to-hand combat in this, the weapons are satisfying. All around, this is an extremely good game for the 6th generation. Pushed a lot of innovation forward. Really enjoyed the hell out of this, even having not seen the films that it's based on. Long-term viewers of the channel will be no stranger to this next game, but I had to include it considering the topic of conversation for today's video, and that is Crazy Taxi 3 High Roller by Sega. Now, Sega really for a while there was pushing exclusive content on the OG Xbox pretty hard, and partially why the OG Xbox was kind of considered the spiritual successor to the Dreamcast. There were so many great exclusive Sega games on this platform. Now, Sega did release games for all three, but I would make a significant case for the Xbox getting the best output of the three, and I could honestly do a whole video about Sega on the Xbox in the future. If I had to include one, it had to be this game. This is a personal favorite of mine. I've played probably hundreds of hours of this game. Actually, very recently, finally got awesome rank on West Coast. This is the de facto definitive Crazy Taxi game. If you're gonna own one in your collection, I would say this is the one to get, because you get the maps from 1 and 2, aforementioned West Coast. You also get, of course, the small apple from Crazy Taxi 2, and you get Glitter Oasis in Crazy Taxi 3, in addition to an amazing Crazy X mode with a whole bunch of different modes, tons of mission variety. This is just brimming with content, and it's just a Sega feel-good arcade classic. Now, this next one's an interesting one because this series eventually became pretty linked with Microsoft and the Xbox brand, but it kind of took a while because Xbox wasn't around when this series started. The first game came out on the PlayStation and the Sega Saturn, and then the second game came out on the Sega Dreamcast and the PS2 before the Xbox came out, eventually getting ultimate versions of 1 and 2 and a third game as a launch title, and that is Dead or Alive 3. This is an absolutely phenomenal fighting game by Team Ninja and published by Tecmo. I played this again on the Xbox One very recently in HD in widescreen, and this game looks so freaking good. It almost looks like a 360 game. Not to mention the visuals, the fighting mechanics, and the combat engine of this fighting game is just, it's chef's kiss. It's freaking perfection. This is one of my favorite 3D fighting games of all time. Never a dull moment. Super fun to play solo or with some friends. Just great 3D fighting at its finest, one of the best of the generation. Now, if you guys know me, you know I like my obscure, my weird, my wacky, my off the beaten path, you could maybe say my janky games, and this definitely fits that bill. That is Furious Karting here. This is published by Atari, and this did only come out on the Xbox, weirdly enough. This is a kart racer, I would say in the vein of, say, a Mario Kart, but it tries to straddle a slightly more realistic line. It is still wacky, it is still absurd. There are still crazy ass items. You can throw chickens at people. It also uses like more real world actual go-kart style cars, and it's got realistic locations, relatively speaking. It kind of weirdly straddles this line between fantastical and real world, and I wouldn't say it necessarily quite hits the mark, but I had to mention it because it is an exclusive, and it's one that not many people know about, and I don't think I've ever seen it talked about on YouTube, so there you go. Next up, we got an early OG Xbox exclusive that was actually pushed pretty hard by Microsoft, and that is Fuzion Frenzy. I got the best of Platinum Hits version here, which would have retailed for like $9.99 a few years after. This is honestly a pretty good steal. This is a kind of Mario Party style minigame compilation, but definitely got its own flair. It's got like a futuristic kind of spin on it. Some really unique minigames in this. Honestly, pretty good little party game. Definitely a game to play multiplayer, and it plays really well. It's honestly a nice little alternative to the average Mario Party experience. If you're looking for something a little different to play with some folks, this is a decent one. Now, this next one was a childhood favorite for me and my brother growing up. We rented this one from Hollywood Video a lot. While I do recommend this game, I do got to give it a bit of a caveat. That is Kung Fu Chaos. This is a really enjoyable party beat 'em up game. You might be wondering about these stickers here, by the way. These are Microsoft company store stickers. This is what they'd put on games bought by Microsoft employees, usually at a discount. Good luck getting these off. They're like hermetically sealed to the freaking packaging, so I leave them on there. They're kind of fascinating, but yeah, anyways, this game is really a fun little beat 'em up, very good party game, very great multiplayer. Like I said, I do have to give it a caveat though, because there are things in this game. This released, you know, in the early 2000s. There are some culturally insensitive, politically incorrect kind of moments in this game. Like, just to give you an example, the director's name in this is Shao Ting. I wish I was joking. I'm not. They actually named him that. If you can look past the choices in that regard, honestly, the game itself is pretty decently fun, and it's not too expensive. It is locked to this platform. It's not backwards compatible. I think Microsoft might be a little embarrassed that they put their name on this. This was published by them. Probably won't see this one anywhere else. For the Crystal Dynamics fans out there, you might not know this game exists, and that's Mad Dash Racing. This was a launch title for the OG Xbox, didn't come out anywhere else, and this is a really fun on-foot racer. If you're aware of games like Running Wild or Running High on the PS1, there's a couple on the PS1. Very much in the same vein as those games. Instead of racing in, say, karts, you're on foot, and you got these anthropomorphized animal characters. A really fun little game, and actually, because it's Crystal Dynamics, Gex is an unlockable character in this. Now, I should say I've finished the game single player, and I still haven't unlocked Gex. I tried to find codes for how to unlock him. I can't figure out how to get freaking Gex in this game, but I know he's there. I've seen it happen. If you guys know how to unlock Gex, let me know, but honestly, I can recommend this wholeheartedly. It's a really fun racing game with some nice power-ups. Playing an on-foot racer, it even has some light platforming and climbing elements in it, and I just think it's a really nice take on the racing genre. Very fresh, very just unique, and a lot of fun, and highly recommend this one. This next one's a bit of a fascinating case, and that is Maximum Chase. I actually have a sealed copy here. This is a really unique mission-based driving game with some shooting elements. A lot of fun. It's a very short game, but it feels like it was almost marketed to the Japanese audience. I don't know how well it did in Japan, but it did also come out here. Very fun, campy, lots of FMV, kind of cheap budget sequences. Honestly, just like a little fun romp. It's not meant to be taken too seriously, and the core gameplay is actually pretty solid. I would recommend this one as kind of a fascinating curiosity. It's not very expensive, and once again, only can get it on the Xbox. Okay, I may have lied. I put another Sega game on here, and that is OutRun 2. This is another one that I just have to gush about. This is obviously the sequel to the first OutRun, which came out in the arcades in the late 80s and got ports to the Genesis and the Saturn, and this is an exclusive version to the Xbox. Other than the arcade, this one only came out on Xbox, as you can tell by the banner here. Now, there were later releases of OutRun 2. There's 2006 Coast to Coast, which is like an expanded version of this game, which later came out for also the PS2 and the PSP, but that game is expensive as heck on pretty much every platform. And this version of the game, while there is less content, it's got a lot of the core content that you'd really care about, and it's fractions of the price as 2006 Coast to Coast. So I recommend this one on that basis alone. Honestly, I feel like this trounces the first OutRun in every possible way, and that comes from an OutRun fan. This is just one of the best arcade racers. I was gonna say of the era, but possibly ever. It's just perfection, honestly, and Sega once again killing it with the racing games. Love this game to death. Highly recommend it. Okay, last Sega game, guys. Sorry. This is Panzer Dragoon Orta on the OG Xbox. I have the Platinum Collection version that came out in Japan. This actually did come out in the US as well, but didn't get a greatest hits release. And actually, my copy is sealed here, which is pretty neat. This is another one I remember renting back in the day from Hollywood Video, and I think there's even like a Hollywood Video exclusive Panzer Dragoon Orta demo that I'd love to track down one of these days. But if you guys aren't aware of the Panzer Dragoon franchise, they are essentially on-rails shooters. Got their start in the arcades and then on the Saturn. This one came to the Xbox, and it is absolutely gorgeous. This is another one that is backwards compatible on the newer Xboxes. Honestly, it looks phenomenal on whatever hardware you play it on. Just one of the best on-rail shooters probably to ever come out. If you're into that genre at all of on-rail shooters, this is a absolute must play. Highly recommend it. I'm sure many of you are aware of the Spy vs. Spy comics from Mad Magazine, and you might even be familiar with a couple of the games. I know Nintendo platforms like the NES and the Game Boy Color got some games. Did you guys know there was a game that came out in 2005 for the Xbox, and it's a 3D espionage game? This game is really underrated. This was another one I rented a lot as a child, and honestly, the multiplayer was where I spent the absolute majority of my time with this back in the day, but I recently played through the single player, and the single player is honestly like pretty full-featured. It's got quite a bit of content, a lot of variety, lots of different levels to traverse and make your way through. Honestly, this is really underrated, and I should say this was Xbox exclusive exclusive in America, but if you are in Europe or any of the PAL regions, it did come out on the PS2 as well there. But I believe this was console exclusive in the US, just on the Xbox. Who would have thought? This next one is a franchise that probably many of you are aware of if you played a Sega Genesis back in the day. And actually, this was my introduction to the franchise, and that is ToeJam and Earl 3 Mission to Earth. Now, for those that aren't aware of the ToeJam and Earl franchise, started out on the Genesis, as I mentioned, and was really like an early example of a console kind of roguelike game. And then the second game, Panic on Funkatron, Sega pushed the developers to kind of go in a more traditional direction, make it more like a traditional 2D platforming game, and I felt like that really released to mixed results. It's not a bad game, it's just not really ToeJam and Earl in my eyes, and 3 really returns to the roots of the first game and basically expands upon it and makes it work really well in a 3D space. I think this game is quite the little gem. This was originally developed and was being designed for the Dreamcast before the Dreamcast kind of hit the can, and they ported it over to the Xbox. And I actually love this game so much. This was another one I rented from Hollywood Video, so it's very special that I have this Hollywood Video rental version because I have fond memories of renting this one back in the day. I think if you're a fan of roguelikes, you've probably not played one like this. I know a lot of them tend to have very dark themes and they're very serious. It's weird to play a roguelike with like really intense difficulty, and yet you got these fun alien characters and funk music, and just the whole vibe of this game is fantastic. And I finally, after many years of playing this as a kid and up through the years, beat this on stream. Really satisfying game to finish finally after all this time. And last but certainly not least, to round off our big list here today, we've got good old Voodoo Vince on the OG Xbox. Now, this is a game that has been remastered, but it is only available on PCs via Steam and, of course, the modern Xbox consoles. But yeah, this came out originally on the OG Xbox. This honestly is probably one of my favorite 3D platformers ever. I don't say that lightly. Admittedly, 3D platforming is a genre that I'm quite selective about. I will admit that, but I absolutely love this game. The setting of this, it takes place in a very Creole, New Orleans, you know, southern vibe. You are Mr. Vince here. He is a voodoo doll, and one of the absolute coolest mechanics is the fact that anything that you do to yourself in terms of like special moves happens to enemies in the game and with these AoE attacks, and it's just such a nice change up to the way combat in 3D platforming works. Very cool game, lots of great music, sound design, visuals are very striking, very unique. This is a favorite for a reason. I definitely think everybody that's into the 3D platforming genre deserves to have Voodoo Vince on their radar. So guys, that's it for today's list. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope I was able to shed some light on some pretty unique OG Xbox exclusives. You know, not all of these are super well known, and hopefully I maybe introduced you to at least a couple new games that you want to maybe check out. Did I miss anything? I'm sure I did. The OG Xbox library is almost 1,000 games large, and people forget just how many exclusive games are on this system. So hopefully this was educational and informative and entertaining for you. And until next time, guys, take care. Thanks for watching. Growing up, we rented this one.